content itself and the data services is the first piece to actually start at least auditing and getting your arms around in terms of developing a mobility strategy. Now, there are solutions from our partners in terms of services like OneDrive for Business that allows you to actually start using like shadow IT sort of functionality with the corporate controls, with identity and security around that. But that also comes with a cultural and organisational change management process as well, because it's a completely new way of people consumer service. So you might have, and this is probably one of the other challenges around user profiling, you might have some people who are really comfortable going and using Dropbox, for example, but you've also got some people that might have been working in the same function for 15 years that are very used to the old ways of doing things. And you've got to take both sets of users on the change journey. And OneDrive for Business, for example, introduces a completely new way of consuming unstructured data that some people may be terrified of that change, which is why taking on that change journey is really important.
And I think, Scott, you've touched on something that most organizations are struggling with today, is the amount of content that they actually have. And I think even before you start looking at the technology, is take a step back and talk with the business. IT needs to get out and visit with the business and understand how the data is actually being utilized.
Yep.
Getting an understanding of the vast amount of unstructured data, looking at when that data has actually been touched.
Yeah.
We find with a lot of our customers that they have a vast amount of data that actually may not even have an owner anymore.
Yeah.
And so once you have the context around the content, you can then start to develop policy, whether it's retention policy, whether it's a deletion policy. And once you have that, and you can classify, then you can start saying, well, this is potentially the information that I can move into OneDrive, or this is potentially information that I may need to keep internal based on particular compliance regulations, et cetera. So first step is understand your data.
Yep.
Well, the other thing on that is we're finding that lots of customers have many different repositories and different types of access. So they might have some content in SharePoint, they might have some stuff in Dropbox or Google Drive or OneDrive or whatever. What we're seeing is that customers are starting to look for solutions that allow them to stitch all of those services together in a single cohesive access medium.
Yes.
So something that will let them enforce policy across multiple storage silos.
Yes.
And then allow them to kind of, without dumbing down the specifics of those silos, right?
Yep.
So for being able to check files into SharePoint, if you access that through the mechanism that stitches it together, you want to be able to check those files out.
Yep.
You want that context to exist on the mobile device.
Yep.
The same as if you've got users starting to transition away from their home drive.
Yep.
You want to be able to present it in such a way that it's familiar,
Yes.
but allows you to then also consume it as you need to as an end user. So as an example for content, you might have customers that have existing SharePoint environments. They have existing CIF shares have their unstructured user data on. They may also have something like OneDrive or Google Drive in the mix. With things like the secure content locker from AirWatch, that gives you the ability to basically enforce policy across all of those with the same policy engine, but then also allow you to, from within the same kind of Dropbox experience, see everything that's in your SharePoint repository, in your CIF share, in your online cloud storage. So it really gives you the ability then to kind of pull that all together in a single cohesive, user experience, but also give IT a single policy engine to make that happen.
So it abstracts the underlying content stores.
Yep. And also gives you the ability then to apply policy across those content stores that don't inherently have policy in there.
I think the single view is really important, but I do think the business does have to have the tough conversation. Going back to Richard's point about data classification, some information that sits in Dropbox in Shadow IT is not appropriate to be in that sort of environment, and that's where the IT department needs, with the business, with their support, needs to go and have that conversation with their end users to say, some of this information that may be in Dropbox is not appropriate to be outside the corporate firewall. Some of it can still remain. The footy tipping ladder internally can probably stay in Dropbox. That's fine. But but that's why data classification, and going back to Richard's point, is so important.
So short of actually doing a sort of a cloud usage assessment where you can actually sort of monitor traffic to different public clouds, what's the best way to start? How do you get a grasp? How do our customers get a grasp on what data is actually out there and what's being used?
So I think you touched on it before with understanding where the flow of traffic is happening, looking at what's going out of the firewalls, understand what services they are going out to. And then it's, part of the user segmentation is to understand what users are consuming and why. So, if you've got sales reps who are using, OneDrive, for instance, what data are they storing in there? And why are they storing it in there?
I think also if you look at technology from semantics, such as semantic data insight, it actually allows you to profile your data on the network. It allows you to actually look at your unstructured data and provide you with the context about who's accessing it, when they've accessed it, whether, again, as I said earlier, whether it's been 10 years since that particular piece of information has been accessed. That's the first step in actually being able to classify your data, is taking the time to understand your data. Once you actually understand your data and you're able to then start to, allow you can then wrap policy around it. So as data flows up into secure content locker, actually being able to use technology like semantic DLP to provide controls around that, to say, well, because we've been able to profile it, we understand what's in the data, we're actually then able to control it. We're able to take that policy and apply it and say, potentially that doesn't belong up there. Yeah. And we apply that across all of the different mediums.
So I think these are very important points, and I think it's something that needs to be addressed. But I just want to be clear that there's benefit alone in the abstraction.
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
that you gain control of what is being used.
Absolutely.
And this also goes some way into defeating shadow IT, in that you're providing services that people want to use.
Yes.
If your data follows you between devices, if it's easy to use, if it connects, your home drives, your SharePoints, your Ceph, you don't need to go anywhere else. So you don't need to sign up to your Dropbox.
So you don't have to go.
Multi-pronged approach, right?
Dave's spot on. If you're providing an experience that is equivalent or better, you're going to defeat shadow IT, because policy is not going to combat the rise of shadow IT. People will find a way around policy. There's always a way. If you need to provide as good or a better experience than what they're actually consuming through shadow IT now to get them back on board.
And let's also not forget that the abstraction of content from their source also gives IT some more flexibility in that if they need to, go on the journey Rich has talked about, in that classifying data or migrating data from source A to source B, they can do that without impacting the end users over time.
One of the other things that it also solves is we talk about multiple data sources, a consistent user experience. We haven't. The challenge that IT has at the moment is inconsistency of data, of the same data across a number of data sets. And it also resolves this issue of being able to present one data set in many ways. So you take the point of OneDrive for Business, Scotty, and the fact that you can access data, you can consume that data via a web page, you can consume it via a folder, you can consume it on a mobile device. So by putting in solutions like this, it ensures consistency of that data, having that one source of truth in relation to data.
So once you've got control or understanding of what that data sets are being used, and then that will aid things like collaboration, because people use those sorts of cloud storage providers to enable the ability to share a piece of information between themselves and people either within their organisation or outside of their organisation, depending on what their job function is and what they do and the industry they work in. But then what we're starting to see now is that alone is not enough. And there is really a social aspect to that. So if we're collaborating on a piece of data, we want the ability to say, say for an example, a PowerPoint presentation. I go into this PowerPoint presentation, I've shared it amongst us, and I go and change slide 23. And if you don't know that I've gone and changed that, or for what reason, you might just look at it and go, don't know why he's done that, reverse. By being able to attach a social aspect to it to collaborate, you can say, change slide 23, did this because of blah, 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 and you start getting a chat going around it. And then that gives you context to why you've changed it. And that stops you having to then pick the phone up and call somebody and say, hey, I saw you change this document yesterday, what did you do and why? And that makes people more productive and more effective.
I'll just jump back to your first point around content and how that can, by having the data centralised, aids collaboration. I think it's also important to note that the abstraction of the content from the underlying services also not only aids collaboration, it makes it possible.
Yeah.
In some cases, you know, we've seen examples where, you know, you're working with an external contractor or an external agency,
Yep.
and they will send you a link to product X. Like, I don't use product X. I don't have the client for product X. How do I use this product? By abstracting that and using, you know, standard-based URL access,
Yep.
it means your collaboration with external parties is also simplified.
Well, it also opens up users. So, you know, where we're seeing this really is in healthcare. You know, you've got all of these specialists that go between different hospitals across different HHSs. And what will happen is they might want to collaborate with another clinician who is part of another hospital. If IT will allow them to do that, they could effectively, a good example is a patient comes in with a busted knee. The clinician can take a photo of that knee and then put it into the secure content locker and share it out to the other people that they're allowed to share it out to. So IT have vetted a group of people they're allowed to share and collaborate with. They can say, what is your opinion on this, blah, blah, blah. They start getting a chat going around that. They can then also then get information back in a more timely fashion that would then allow them to drive a better outcome for the patient. So we're starting to see that kind of thing come into it as well. It's more, once we've got the data, it can then be replicated back to the data center. That could then be attached to their profile as part of their IEMR solution. You know, there's all those sorts of things that we can start to look at as well.
I think one of the things we also need to look at when we talk about data, there is a dislocation between the collaboration solution itself and the data. And one of the things to understand with the mobility framework is to understand why there is data out. You know, some of these collaboration solutions in customers exist to capture that unstructured data and have security controls around it. And what is not working with the collaboration solution, and why is data existing outside of that solution as well? The collaboration solution may not be fit for purpose. It may not have been implemented properly. It may not have had end user adoption executed properly to make sure people are using the solution. Because it might be one of those initiative for initiative's sakes where it just never landed and resonated with users, and they're actually just using shadow IT services to get around the collaboration solution. So I think that's one, there's the potential to have a disconnect between your unstructured data and the data silos and the collaboration solution if they're supposed to be interlinked as well. And that's one thing with the framework that's important to actually look at that, if it's supposed to be dislocated or if it actually, there's a reason for that as well.
So Scott, just exploring the collaboration side a little bit more, you could say that the mobility has had a significant impact on collaboration to the point where you can't have collaboration without mobility anymore. You want to talk us through some of the things that you've seen customers, some of the mistakes customers have made with respect to collaboration in not considering mobility?
Yeah, especially, and it goes back to a prior point about the appropriate interface device and how the data is presented based on the different types of devices and, you know, considering the use cases of people. So they might actually have delivered a collaboration solution that doesn't suit consumption through a mobile device, for example. So, you know, look at the use cases and the interface types for the collaboration solution. But also ease of use is the really big one. A lot of people get around collaboration solutions or don't use them because they're just really hard to use. And again, it goes back to the very start of our conversation around employee engagement. The collaboration solution might have been designed in isolation or designed by IT without user consultation. And it's one of those ones, again, that the adoption services may not have been there to make sure people adopt the solution properly.
Another example of where that it can become a concern is when you talk about sensitive data. And having if you don't consider collaboration as part of your mobility strategy, you could be in a situation where you have your users by no intention of themselves, actually sending out critical sensitive data to external parties. And having a collaboration solution that aligns to your content strategy allows both solutions to work together. So you're essentially kind of defining a solution that has security mechanisms around it, which Richard will no doubt talk around, but at the same time allow for collaboration not only between business users but also between external parties, which is something that is certainly we're seeing time and time again nowadays.